All right, we are actually now to our favorite part of the show because Nomiki and I don't have to do anything. And the adult in the room gets to tell us all what's what. Robbie, what's on your radar?
Thank you very much. I'm glad you asked. This week, President Joe Biden finally sat down for a grueling interview about the rapidly escalating tensions in the Middle East, the security failures that have resulted in multiple assassination attempts against his rival, former President Donald Trump, and whether he is still cognitively fit to serve out the rest of his term. Just kidding. In reality, he made an appearance Wednesday on The View alongside his personal cheering squad, the show's hosts. Now, Whoopi Goldberg was particularly effusive in her praise for the president, describing her support for him as ride or die. Joy Behar joked with him about age being just a number. They are both 81, and then lovingly nuzzled his shoulder. Aw. The ladies did ask him about his decision to exit the presidential race, which drew this reply.
And look, I never fully believed the assertions that somehow there was this overwhelming reluctance of my running again. I didn't sense that. And although the polling, as I said, Biden's polling was different, the fact of the matter is my polling was about, we're always within range of beating this guy.
Let me transcribe that for you in case it was just a little bit hard to understand what he was saying. He said, although the Biden polling was different, my polling was always within range of beating this guy. So that was the most coherent part of the answer. By the way, it's also not at all accurate. Over the course of 2024, Biden's polling steadily worsened against Trump. In the immediate aftermath of his disastrous June debate performance, Biden had dropped to 6 points behind Trump in national polling. But even before the dreaded debate, the polls showed Trump pulling away from Biden. As far back as November 2023, almost a year ago, some polls showed Trump edging out Biden in the key swing states. Importantly, these polls also showed Biden underperforming Trump relative to other Democrats, including, for the first time at that point, Vice President Kamala Harris, who had always polled worse than Biden until then. Biden's favorability ratings had also collapsed since the 2022 midterms. A year ago, maybe, Biden could credibly claim that polls showed him within range of Donald Trump, given significant uncertainties. But by the time Biden's campaign was hurtling toward its ignoble end, this was just no longer true. Biden was going to lose. Later during the conversation on The View, Goldberg remarked that while she supported the outcome, she did not approve of the messy, public manner in which Democratic elites ejected Biden. I don't either. But the messy exit was made necessary because of Biden's own actions, his stubborn refusal to admit that he had no path to re-election. The polls don't lie. He's misleading you about what they said. Now, it's fine for the ladies of The View to treat the president with kindness and respect. But as with the ABC presidential debate between Trump and Harris, it's very telling the prominent Democrats can get away much more easily with statements that are simply untrue. And indeed, many Democrats and supporters of Kamala Harris are in deep denial about her chances in November. She could very well win, but there's an entire cadre of anti-Trump Twitter personalities who are so assured of Trump's defeat that they actually disparage mainstream media for being, get this, too tough on Kamala Harris. I call them Blue Anon because they often sound just as conspiratorial as anyone on the far right. Here's a great example of what I'm talking about. Now, I'm frequently critical personally of the New York Times. You know this, longtime viewers. Though I'm also grateful that its editors have let me written for the opinion section on occasion. Many progressive Democrats, however, are also critical of the Times. They tend to take the insane position that the paper is too pro-Trump. Really, I kid you not. Consider this post from left-leaning journalist Dan Frumkin, who accuses the Times of, quote, boosting Trump's candidacy by refusing to report that Harris is, quote, destroying Trump in the electoral race. He thinks that's the state of the race. Frumkin cites as evidence this column by Drew Magary, an opinion writer for the San Francisco Chronicle and an avowed anti-Trumper. Now, Magary slams the Times for describing the race between Trump and Harris as deadlocked, when actually, according to him, Harris is way ahead, destroying Trump. Magary says Harris is way ahead because Trump is losing in Pennsylvania, a state he needs to win, by 4 points. Okay, let's fact check that. To be sure, there are polls that show Harris up by as many as 5 points in Pennsylvania, but many other polls have her leading by just 1 or 2 points. Nate Silver's average puts Harris 1.5 points, 1.5 points, above Trump in the state. Okay, Here's the real problem. I want to be very clear about this. During the run-up to the 2020 election, the polls showed Biden beating Trump by 4, 5, or 6 points in the state of Pennsylvania, according to CNN. We've got it up on screen. Now, when the votes were tallied, Biden did win the state, but it was by 1.17%. In other words, if the polling error in Democrats' favor is as egregious in this cycle as it was in 2020, Trump will win the state and probably the presidency. Now, it's certainly possible the polls are more accurate this time around, sure, but that's why the presidential race is currently best described as a toss-up. Neither candidate is destroying the other. Maybe Drew Magary, who infamously predicted that Trump was going to get his ass kicked in the 2016 election, should just stick to writing about sports. But this is the level of delusion, not just of Biden-Harris surrogates on social media and in progressive circles, but of, occasionally, Joe Biden himself. And so this is, I thought, helpful to go back and look at the polling here. Because, yes, I see that, according to the most recent polling, Kamala Harris is up a little bit in several of the swing states, including Pennsylvania. But Biden, it's crazy. If you look at the polling, Biden versus Trump, week before the election, shows Biden winning Pennsylvania by 6 points. And he won it by 1 point. So I don't know. I would not be confident that Kamala Harris is destroying Trump. Isn't that insane?
I think it's insane, and I think the Kamala Harris campaign understands it's insane to be that confident. We've been there before, guys.
Yeah.
She does have the energy, though, and so I do think there's a difference in that. While technically everything's within the margin of error, even Trump versus Biden, a few months ago was within the margin of error. So maybe that's generally what he was saying. But it was clear that the enthusiasm was the issue. The enthusiasm gap is a problem, and pretty much any presidential candidate, right or left, if you have the enthusiasm, you're most likely going to see better results on Election Day. It's always close. We know that every single year.
Amber, you and I complain a lot about the mainstream media, the New York Times, for anti-conservative bias, those kinds of things. But it's real. There's a segment of the internet out there on social media, on Twitter, or maybe they're on Blue Sky now, or wherever, I don't know, long COVID patients go or something, to say that the mainstream media is biased in favor of Trump and against Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
That is a fervent belief.
It's incredible. So they basically go back to 2016, where they claim that the media was responsible for platforming Trump too much, for giving him too much attention on cable news and broadcast news channels, and therefore that's why he won, which is a complete, of course, misunderstanding of why Trump was able to capture his base in the way that he was. It's not because he was covered on Morning Joe. And so then you actually saw media correct on this misconception, where places like CNN and MSNBC would no longer cover Trump rallies live. They would do live fact-checking during some of his public appearances, which they don't do for pretty much any other public official. And now, even still, you have these loonies on the internet claiming that the mainstream media is biased towards Trump. It's obviously patently ridiculous. On the poll question, if I were the Trump campaign, one trend that I would be concerned about is that Kamala has closed the gap quite significantly on the issues. So, for example, Trump was up double digits against Biden on the economy and immigration. He's only up by about 9 or 10 points on Kamala Harris on those two issues. That's obviously a pretty significant closing of that margin. And the issues are what voters are thinking about when they go to the polls. So he has to find some way to regain that lead that he had on Biden on those top maybe 4 or 5 issues for voters.
That's a good point. We'll be back with more Rising right after this.